Thank you very much, Mark, for this fascinating overview about such a rich life and such an inspiring life. I think also the lesson to, in the mid of cultural revolution, to seize this as a learning opportunity, not just to complain. I think that's so many lessons to learn. So I would now open the floor. First, also welcome also our online participants, but as I want also to honor those who kind of came here, please now challenge Mark with difficult questions. So,
not too difficult, please. Please.
Yeah, please, Martin.
Thank you. I don't know whether this is a difficult question or not, but I'm just really interested in this notion of taking what, how many characters were there in ancient Chinese? Well over 1,000.
Much more than 1,000.
10,000?
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. And then taking this down into effectively 100 onto the pinyin scheme. So my question, I suppose, is about how language performs, what Western linguistic philosophers call perlocutionary words, ways in which words actually make things happen. And whether there's anything lost in pinyin or gained as a result of this reduction. Well, it's not a reduction, is it? It's a compression of language into a written form. I mean, I see the statistics that, you know, 1 billion people become literate and so forth, but are there terms, characters, words that acquire additional performative strength as a result of this process that you've described?
Well, as I understand, a university graduate in China has about 6,000 characters, and you need about 2,500 for the daily life. So I think Dr. Zhou's priority was, of course, the 2,500, the ones that I use most. And then the next group would be the next 3,000 used by more educated people. But if he was sitting here, he would answer your question by saying that pinyin is just a tool for learning Chinese. It doesn't change the language or change the meaning. It's just a way for you to learn it more easily. And of course, many people criticized him, saying, look, you are trying to replace characters. He said, no, it's just a means to learn them better. Now, the issue of whether it should be traditional or simplified characters, I mean, that's another debate, which we have not had time for today, and I didn't see him write about that. I'm sure he had opinions, but he didn't. Because that is a more difficult point.
Yes.
Because in Taiwan, where I studied, my teachers had very strong opinions about this.
Yep.
But I think we don't go into that.
That's incredibly helpful. So in effect, this is a system of shorthand, which is why learning from Greg was so important.
Yes.
In the first place.
Yes.
And by shorthand, everybody can speak and write shorthand.
Yeah, because the key thing is, if you've learned pinyin, then you read the characters, you can learn them much more quickly, and then you are able to speak better, and you're able to read better, and it accelerates everything. And then once the typewriters came and computers came, of course, we have to adapt the characters and pinyin to the computers, and in my case, the way I write Chinese or go to the internet is I use pinyin. So you write the pinyin, and the computer gives you all the characters with that sound, and then you choose it. I mean, this is rather primitive. I mean, Chinese secretaries can write extremely fast because, of course, the computers they use are much more advanced, and they have the combinations. You know, most words are 2 characters. So they know in advance what you're thinking, and they give you the options. So maybe you just write 2 letters, and they give you the character or even the whole sentence, you know.
Thank you, Martin. Hier, Heinz-Gerhard.
Yeah, thank you very much for your interesting thought. It was mind-blowing at times. What I would like to ask is, there were the first literacy campaigns in China, I think, after the revolution in 49, 50s. No? They even went to Tibet, young people initiated by the Communist Party. What type of language did they use to do this literacy campaigns at the time? Because pinyin was not yet the option, if I understood your comments well.
Well, no, remember, Republic of China also had many literacy campaigns. I mean, they start as soon as Republic of China is set up. But because of the wars, the Japanese invasion, internal conflicts, the very slow progress. But after 49, the communists were able to stabilize the situation. So I think before 49, the literacy campaigns were more on the traditional way. You just have to learn each character. So of course it was much slower, it was much more difficult, and especially in rural areas, mountainous areas, there were not equipment and books and blackboards, and it was extremely difficult to move forward with these campaigns. You're quite right. From 1949, this was one of the priorities of the new government, was to make China literate. And there were three aspects of the Reform Commission. One was pinyin, one was the simplified characters, and the other was to make Putonghua the national language. So these three have not changed ever since.
Yeah, please, Father Gregory.
Thank you very much for a most instructive, inspiring talk with anecdotes, jokes and so on, especially that part about the geese, the wild geese.
The geese,
shitting on the fertilizing the field. This I will remember.
It's God giving a signal to them.
Yes. Now, in spite of the hard times, in spite of all this dark and dreary time that this Dr. Zhou is against all odds. And this admirable, I find, character, he's optimistic, he's humorous. He didn't bend, but somehow he survived against all odds. Now, this is his attitude towards life. And this is what I'm asking from your research. That aside from all this pinyin, he also wrote other books. You mentioned about 20.
Yes.
Now he would be a very influential person for future generation of Chinese and, of course, for the whole world.
Yes.
Because in my mind, a great figure, a great person, against all these setbacks, he still maintained his sanity and his contribution to the whole nation and to the whole world. Now I'm asking, from your research of the books that he has written, of course, somehow they reflect his spirit, Zhou Youguang, let there be light. Now he is enlightening, for future generation. I believe, for example, Sushi, that's my favorite, a poet and so on, against all odds, with all this. But he still maintained his sanity, his spirit. He seems to be a very joyful person, enjoying life. But for another person could have just, so much what you call traumatized his daughter, his wife, and so on and so forth. But this person, instead of giving up,
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
So the first question is, among other writings in the books in your research, and also what motivated him against all this? Is that Christian spirit? Did he read the Bible? Was he a Christian? He was not a communist. He was not nationalist. So what motivated this person to live, to be genuine to himself, in such hard times?
Well, in the St. John's, he would certainly have met missionaries, of course, because this is one of the subtexts of all the Western universities in China, of course, was evangelization. So he surely met evangelists but he was only there for 2 years. And no, I don't think he was a Christian. No, I don't think so. So where does he get this spirit? You could say he had privileged life. I mean, he grew up in comfort. Well, his family was not so rich, but it was, we would say, upper middle class, and a lot of books and intellectuals. He was in banking. Banking was a very well-paid job, you know, before 1949. He lived in America. He lived in the UK. You know, he had a good life. He was well respected by his peers. He had a very happy marriage. He got on well with his colleagues. But, you know, when we lived in the mainland, we met so many intellectuals who lost 10 years, 15 years of their life to the Cultural Revolution. And they came back to Beijing or came back to Shanghai. They had lost their best years, you know. They had no money because you weren't paid anything. They found their position in the university was already taken by a younger person who just come back from America with PhD. They were so full of bitterness, and it was very hard for them to recover. So he was lucky in that he was working in this China Character Reform Commission that shielded him from the worst persecution. And in this camp in Ningxia, it was only there 2 years and 4 months. I mean, he did farm labor, but it wasn't as bad as what I've read, like in some people were in Heilongjiang, Jilin province, Xinjiang, you know, these terrible weather, terrible conditions. It wasn't as bad as that. And I'm not answering the question. So I really can't quite explain where he get this vitality and this good attitude from, but maybe he's born with it. You know? Yeah, sorry, not a very good.
So many languages. Did he publish anything outside of Chinese in foreign languages, and the articles in different topics?
Well, I must be careful what I say. I mean, of course, he completely had ability to write for foreign newspapers or magazines or to be published abroad, but, you know, most of his life, it was not possible. You know, it was not possible. I mean, the conditions not. I mean, you know, if he had been in Taiwan, of course, you know, he would easily find publisher in America. So, no, to my knowledge, he wrote in Chinese. But he would, as I say, he got many foreign visitors. He would say, "What do you have for me?" You can't arrive with nothing. You can't just bring some chocolates, you know. You have to bring copies of Time magazine or Newsweek or Washington Post. I mean, you have to bring some intellectual food, which he could not obtain in Beijing. So he was in touch with that world. But I think he couldn't, no, I think he couldn't write for them. Yeah. It's unfortunate. We are now entering a minefield.
Yes, please, Father Fernando.
Thank you for your very interesting sharing. We will be very careful if we see two geese flying around and try to run away as fast as possible. Two questions. Not being a linguistic, why he was called to be part of this commission? And second, linked to what you have said, probably there were other members in the commission also, important people, I imagine. And probably now they are trying to exalt other members of that commission who were also somehow responsible of being fathers of the pinyin. Could you mention a little bit about how this commission worked, who were there, how many people, and why he was elected to be or invited to be a member of this commission?
Well, it was very soon after 1949, the central government start to think how to write Romanized system. So a lot of research was done. Many experts gave proposals to Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai, and none of them were accepted. And there was a very fierce debate within the party, within the intellectual community, but they couldn't find one that was acceptable. So it was at that moment that Chairman Mao read one of Dr. Zhou's books, and he was very impressed with it. And it was an account of different Romanized systems in the world. So it was decided to summon Dr. Zhou to Beijing and join it. Now, you're completely right. To call him father of pinyin is not factually accurate. But if my book title is one of the fathers of pinyin, maybe we don't get anyone to buy it. Sorry, for the title, you have to. And if Dr. Zhou is sitting here, he would say, you know, it was collective effort. You know, many people contributed. So yes, I think there were about 20 people in his group. They were all very high-level scholars. The 3 years of work was very intense, was very criticized. People sent in a lot of suggestions. He had to reply to all of them. He would also say, we don't have the perfect system, you know. It was the best that we could do at the time. So, you know, Chinese has no relation to Romanized letters at all. You know? I mean, can I just explain what happened in the other countries in East Asia? I mean, characters were the written language of Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. So what happened in these three countries? In Korea, in the 15th century, the king decided the characters were too difficult because only a few people in the court, intellectuals, could understand them. So he set up a commission of scholars, and they developed the Hangul system. And the Hangul system is completely logical and correct. And my Korean friends say it's the best writing system in the world because it, you know, French, English, German, so many exceptions. My wife asked me today, le page, la page. You know, now in Hangul, you don't have this problem, you know. So, but the king of Korea was very intelligent. He kept both. So in South Korea, I mean, Hangul is dominant, but still they use the characters also. So that's one solution. In Vietnam, it was the Jesuit missionaries. They also decided that Chinese is too difficult. So they make a Romanized system of Vietnamese language, and that is the basis of the one that's used today by the communist government of Vietnam. It's the Romanized system, and they don't use any more of the characters. Now in Japan, the emperor in the Tang dynasty sent 500 monks to Xi'an, which was the capital, and they spent 10 years in Xi'an learning the characters, and then they went back to Japan and they introduced the characters to Japanese, because before Japanese had no written form. So in Japanese, then we have, you know, for water, the Japanese word is mizu. You write with a Japanese syllabary, but you can also use a Chinese character instead. So we have the two systems. And then later, Japan developed two other writing systems because they considered characters too difficult. One is hiragana, and one is katakana, which is used for imported words. So in Japan, you had three writing systems. Now, hiragana and katakana are easier because you just have to learn how the strokes, and then you can read the characters. But the characters you have to learn. And during the Meiji Restoration, after 1868, there was the same debate that there was in China after the Republic of China was set up, which is, why do we still have characters? How can we become an industrialized modern country with this kind of language? So some scholars said we give up Japanese completely and we switch to French. We just accept French. We just make French the language of Japan, because French was considered, scientific, a modern language. Now, in the end, they didn't do it. But that's the kind of thinking that was, at that time. So China was the only country that kept the characters as its writing system. So can you see how difficult it was for Dr. Zhou and his colleagues to match it with the Roman letters, because the pronunciation is not similar at all.
Thank you, Mark, very much indeed. I think you have given us not only tonight, but with your various publications. I mentioned also Huxi, Ziqi, and Frederick was your missionary grandfather, yes, which I also find very interesting. Also challenge us to better learn the journey, better getting into the lessons of what we can learn from such a rich, you could also say even to the missionary journey.
Yeah.
So this was also along these lines that I'm happy to announce that October 18th and 19th, we would have our symposium of the Macau Ricci Institute, this time in cooperation with the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies of the University of Macau, on cultural exchange between China and the West. As we remember, Marco Polo, the 7th anniversary of his death. We will have prominent speakers. We have here among us, though, Father Edmund A., Father Jaroslav Duraj. And yes, we really want to continue on this very fascinating journey. Just double check with Brian, is there any urgent question online we have to address tonight? Otherwise, really, thanks again. Seize not only the chance to buy the books, but also continue our conversation over our refreshments. Please stay here, and really thanks again. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, my pleasure. Okay.